Hey class, here we go. Part 2. Are you ready? Part 2 for the communication theory part. Let's see, is this lighting good? Who knows? I think it's okay. Kind of in the shadows. It's so much fun, isn't it? I'm out of my daughter's room now. I've changed rooms because my husband and my son are not here. So, with any luck, we won't be interrupted. Anyway, so part 2. So remember last time, what we're doing right now in both classes is we're covering the communication theory part of this course. And remember, we started talking about the transactional model of communication. Remember the questions we're trying to answer. What is communication? Why do so many miscommunications occur? And then how do we minimize this, right? You've got some other questions thrown in there, but that's what we were looking at. And we started to break down the terms of the transactional model of communication and looked a little bit at past models and all that fun stuff. So, what is communication? It's this whole transactional process of sending and receiving messages, and what we're trying to achieve is shared meaning. So, just to catch us up. Now, there's a couple of things I want to emphasize from last time's lectures. And you know what? It occurs to me, I need to turn this up. There. Okay. So there's a couple things I want to stress from the part 1 lecture. And I mentioned this in the overview, but I want to re-emphasize it for you. So notice our terms: the interactional model of communication and the transactional model of communication. Notice the term action, class. From a communication theorist's point of view or perspective, communication is an action. It's not just a bunch of words. And particularly in a democracy, public speaking, rhetoric, the act of public speaking, is an action. And when you are in your regular interpersonal communication with other people, between people, interpersonal, that is an action. Within business organizations, when you are in small groups and you are making important decisions and you are making your arguments for or against a policy, that is an action. Communication, words, translate into actions that can then become policies that actually do impact people's lives and are not a bunch of words, right? So keep that in mind, because that's part of our Greco-Roman history too, is by making arguments. That's how certain laws and certain laws get passed, certain policies are adopted, and certain ways of thinking about the world and ways of valuing the world happen. So make no mistake. From this perspective, communication is an action. Okay, so that's important. The other thing I wanted to stress is this idea of media, of mediated communication, mass media. Keep in mind that media is simply the plural of medium. Okay, we almost never use it in its singular form, but media is the plural of medium. And medium has to do with channel. That's actually one of your vocabulary terms that we're going to pick up with. We covered source, receiver, encoding, decoding. We're going to talk about the codes more today. We've talked about the message, but now with this idea of media and mediation, we come to our word channel, and that's down here, remember, on your study guide. Notice, channel is the medium or the visual auditory means by which the message is transmitted from sender to receiver. Okay, it's a really convoluted way of saying what is in between the sender and the receiver. And I don't have my little piece of paper, but I really don't want to crumple this up. Anyway, so remember we had our little paper that represents the message. Well, and here's this hand is person A and this hand is person B, or source receiver. What does the message, that piece of paper, have to pass through to get to the receiver? What is in the middle? So medium, media, mediation all has to do with middle. Okay, what does it have to travel through? What is between the sender and the receiver? And how does that channel impact the quality of that message, because it impacts it a lot. So what are some, it's easier to define channel by giving examples. So what are some examples of channels? The radio, when a message goes through, is transmitted via radio waves. Okay, so radio. TV, right? The channel is going through TV, right? So that's a channel. When we talk about our computer or electronically mediated messages, it has to go through our computer, like it is now, right? So a text message is a channel. It's via text, via phone. It's going through words. A letter is a channel. Email is a channel. What medium is being used? What channel is being used for that message to get from point A to point B, or person A to person B, or source receiver? What does it have to pass through? Even a handwritten letter, right? A letter, that would be the channel. So keep that in mind, this idea of media, of mediation, and how does it impact, right, the message that we're sending? What does it have to pass through? What is in between? What's in the middle? So why am I emphasizing this so much? Because this relates back to one of our concepts down here, and that is the channel you use to send a message also sends a message. And it also comes back to our question, why do so many miscommunications occur? Because depending upon the channel you use, you may be missing some of the communication codes. And what are those codes? That's back up at the top. And remember, it's the three that we were mentioning, the three codes: the verbal code, the vocal code, and the nonverbal code. Remember, the verbal code is the language code. It's anything to do with words. It also includes written language. Typically, when we use the term verbal, it's synonymous with oral language. That's correct, but the technical meaning, the technical definition of verbal is anything to do with words. Think verb, right? So technically, verbal communication is also written. It has to do with words. So it's written language as well as oral language. So keep that in mind. Verbal equals language code. The other code is the vocal code, and that's our tone of voice. That's our what we call paralanguage. And our tone of voice, the volume of our voice, the way we're stressing a particular word, our pitch, our rate of speaking. Are we talking really fast because we're really excited? Or are we slowing it down for emphasis, perhaps? The rhythm, the pacing, the vocal quality of our voice communicates all of that. And then, of course, our nonverbals, our body language, right? Our facial expressions, our posture, our eye contact, our movements, even the way we're dressed, our appearance. I was telling my husband, it's like, yeah, look at me, I'm in my Darth Vader shirt. Maybe this isn't very professional, for a professor, but whatever. We're in weird times. But that would be an example. If I were dressed up in a business suit and making this a very formal presentation, that would be one thing, and I would be. But since this is a classroom situation, I still consider myself to be a professional, but my sort of style in the classroom is not I don't want it to be real uptight. Do you know what I mean? That's just not my personal style. And the context of the classroom, it is more, I want it to be more accessible. So see, that's an example. But if I were in a very formal environment, like a job interview, for example, I wouldn't come to the job interview in my Darth Vader sweatshirt, right? So even that communicates, but that's your body language, your facial expressions, all that, your gestures, all of that fun stuff. Those are our three primary codes. All right, so you're saying big deal, Ms. McNeil. What, who cares? Well, let me give you some examples. So let's take what paralanguage does to a message. Okay, what the vocal tone does. So, and you're also going to have access to my body language. So let's take the word nothing. Okay, nothing. So just pretend, and this is what I would normally do if we were in a live classroom, we'd actually act it out and demonstrate it. But just pretend that here I am, I'm walking in, here's another person that I'm greeting, and that other person, look, maybe it's my cat. Can you see my cat in the chair? Well, he's not talking. Anyway, pretend like there's another person here, and that person says, "Oh, hey Lisa, how are you doing today?" And I say, "Nothing." Or what, how are you doing today? "Well, I'm okay." "Well, so what did you do last night?" "Nothing." Okay, so that's going to be our repetition is, so hey, what did you do last night? "Nothing." So now I enter again, and the person asks me, so what did you do last night? "Nothing." Okay, and cut. Third entrance, third scene. The person asks me now, so what did you do last night? "Nothing." Okay, so that's an example. And of course, you could see my body language and my facial expressions. But even if we had been on the cell phone, you would have heard it. Nothing, nothing, nothing. My vocal tone, my inflection gave you three different meanings, did it not? Notice it was the same word, nothing. But was it the same message, class? No, it was three different messages. What did the first nothing mean? So what did you do last night? Nothing. Really didn't do anything. Nothing actually meant nothing. I didn't do anything. Second, so what did you do last night? Nothing. So maybe I'm upset because I didn't do anything, right? So nothing, I'm angry. You were supposed to call me or whatever it was. The third one, so what did you do last night? Nothing. Ah, something happened, did it not? Nothing actually meant something, perhaps a bit naughty at that. But anyway, you get my drift here, class. The same word symbol, but the paralanguage, the tone of voice, gave it three different meanings. And if we'd been on the phone, and in this case, since you could also had the visual code, you could see me, you could see my body language and facial expressions, that also impacted the meaning of the message. So that's kind of a straightforward example. But let's now bring in this idea of channel. So notice the channel you use, okay, the channel you use to send a message can impact that message, because depending upon the channel you use, the sender and the receiver have access to all three codes. The channel you use impacts how many of those codes, those communication codes, are present. And so think about it. If it's a very important message, right? You have to tell someone that someone close to them has passed away. So typically, if possible, you try to tell someone that kind of information face to face. And in fact, we refer to messages that we talk about the face-to-face channel. Now, technically, in a face-to-face communication where we're both in the same time and space, technically the channel is the air, the vocal vibrations, the visual, um, uh, the the ability to see the other person that's happening in the same time and space. It's typically going through the air, but we don't say that. We call it the face-to-face channel, as a matter of fact. In the face-to-face channel, both the sender and the receiver, particularly the receiver, has access to all three codes. They can see you, they can see your body language or facial expressions, what we call your nonverbals. Okay, this is body language. The nonverbal code includes all of that. And they can hear you. They have the paralanguage, your vocal tone, your inflection, and of course, the language code. So notice by choosing the face-to-face channel, you are minimizing the potential for miscommunication. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to miscommunicate. I'm just saying at least you have all three codes. But if you pick, say, a text message, for example, what's happened to the codes? In a text message, what's the only code you have access to? The language code, right? Because you cannot see the other person's facial expressions, what they're wearing, their nonverbals. You don't have access to that. You also you don't have the paralanguage. You can't hear them. You don't know their inflections. You don't know if they're being sarcastic. So the only thing you have is the language or the verbal code in a text message channel. That opens up or makes the potential for miscommunication a lot stronger. In fact, to make up for the loss of the paralanguage or vocal code, we've had to invent a whole nother system of symbols. At first they were called emoticons, now they're called emojis, to try to fill in the missing nonverbal, all the little happy faces, the angry faces, we have these pictorial representations to these emojis to try to symbolize, to represent the missing paralanguage, the missing tone of voice, the sarcasm, the all of those different emotions, hence the term emojis. And this is really interesting to me because when you look at all the different cultures, right, of the human race, remember, we all developed oral language first. Everything used to be oral, correct? Okay, then when we started to become literate, we developed into literate cultures, which is we developed a language that could be written down. Guess what we started with? In a lot of cases, we started with pictures first, the hieroglyphics, pictures that represented pictorial things that represented certain things and certain happenings. The hieroglyphics became the language, the pictorial representations. Then we moved on to alphabets. We developed alphabets that then stood for certain sounds and combinations that then became written language as we know it. And then we became literate societies. Okay, literacy. It can be written down. So now it's so funny because it seems like we're coming full circle. And in fact, that's what Walter Ong, who is a scholar who wrote a book called Orality and Literacy, and he traces the whole history of what I just talked to you about, of oral cultures turning into literate ones, and now argues that we are in what is called secondary orality because of our computer mediated communications, and particularly our text messages, where we are now writing like we talk, and this use of emojis and pictures to stand in It's like secondary orality. We have this whole nother system of symbols. Because remember, language is symbolic, as we talked about. It's a representative system of symbols that is meant to represent reality, right? It represents things in reality that we can actually see, touch, hear, etc. But here's the fun thing about language, class. Once you have language, language is generative. Now you can start creating new words, new symbols to represent ideas that we can't hear, touch, see, and feel. Language is creative. It generates new ideas. We can talk about things like freedom and democracy and God and the goddess and or the higher power or whatever we want to call it. We can talk about philosophy and these very abstract ideas that what we can't hear, touch, see, feel. And so very fun. We could actually use language to generate these new ideas, these new thoughts, or these new, philosophies, constructions about what it's like to be alive, about reality, about our existence. So this becomes very fun, and it also sort of leads us back to another question for you to think about: is does the language code just represent reality, or does it construct reality? Think of our current system. Who was it? Was it Kellyanne Conway who talked about alternative facts? That now we can look at this event, and just based on the language that's used to assess what was happening, there's very different constructions of that event. But that's one way to look at it. But you can also think about, how was race constructed 100 years ago versus now? How was gender constructed 100 years ago versus now? There's very different ideas right now, very different constructions of what it is to be feminine, or identify as a woman, versus constructions of what's considered to be masculine behavior and what it is to be a man. And guess what? Right now, which I think is very exciting, some people don't, I think it's fascinating because it's language in action and it's construction in action in a way too. Now we are challenging our whole binary way of talking about gender. And now we're not just using the he or she prefixes. We're not just we're getting out of this binary designation that has constructed everything in he's and she's, or hims or hers, and men and women. I mean, it's really fascinating. So that's something else to think about, and that's postmodern thought. Postmodern philosophers like Derrida and Foucault argued that reality is constructed through language and culture. Culture meaning how we see it, how we're taught, how a particular society teaches us to view those things. And so we're going to get into that a little bit later. But anyway, so back to channel, right? So in a text message, we've got our little emojis, but in the text message, all you have is that verbal code. So now you have more potential for miscommunication. And I bet you all have lots of examples of times when perhaps you've gotten into a completely miscommunication situation because of a text message. And the reason for that is you're missing two of the codes. You're missing two of the codes. You just have the language code. And if you go into your handouts tab, your handout section, your handouts tab under Blackboard, I have uploaded a Key and Peele video for you. It's Key and Peele text message confusion, and it demonstrates this. Because they're using text and they don't have access to the paralanguage code or the vocal code, and they don't have access to the visual code, aka the body language or nonverbal code, they're getting into a lot of misunderstandings. I will warn you, class, on that video, about that video. It is, there's bad language in it. They use the F word a lot. If that bothers you, you can type in Key and Peele text message confusion censored. You can view the censored version. It's just not as funny. All right. That's why it's just not as funny. And, there's a section where he's, I don't know, he's smoking a bong. I don't know. And I'm not advocating the use of drugs. All right. It's just a funny video that I think really demonstrates text message confusion. So you can take a look at that. So the channel you use to send a message impacts how that message is received. And it can really interfere with the meaning, depending upon what code you're missing. When we're on the phone, I'm actually talking to someone, we have the paralanguage code and we have the language code, but we can't see the other person. We can't see the person's nonverbals. So understand that relationship between code and channel. When a message is really important, you probably want to use the face-to-face channel. But you also have to consider, do you have time to communicate this face-to-face? You have to think about the abilities of the receiver. How are they best going to receive it? If it's a very emotional, complex, sensitive issue, you probably do want to use the face-to-face channel. Because remember, even in emails, there's more potential for miscommunication. People are they're gonna fill in the missing codes. They're gonna fill in the missing paralanguage and body language, and sometimes we fill them in wrong. We fill them in incorrectly. So, and that's what happened with my example. When I told you that I texted my colleague and forgot to tell him, oh, by the way, we're at Rio Grande campus, not Valle Verde, I omitted. Whereas if that had been either on the phone or a face-to-face, I could have clarified it. That would not have happened, I don't believe, if it had not been a text. Also, the channel you use to send a message also sends a message. That's another one of your concepts. The channel you use to send a message also sends a message. What do I mean by that? The channel you select communicates the formality of that message, the importance of that message. And although texting and all of that's becoming second nature to us, this still seems to hold. So let me make the point by asking you a question. How many of you have been broken up with via a text? So the person broke up with you using a text message. It's like, see ya, it's over. We're done. Don't want to see you. Text. I don't know. You guys you answer that for yourselves. So in a classroom, normally that I ask, there's always a few say, yeah. And I said, okay, so how did that make you feel? What message did you receive? Well, they broke up with me, but also they didn't have the courage to break up with me in person, right? They either didn't have the courage, it told me they didn't care enough about me to have at least called me on the phone or broken up with me in person. So these are some of the answers I get. Some people, perhaps they don't get that. So you actually get two messages. Yes, it's over. They're breaking up with me. Oh no. But also, because it was done via a text, wow. And on top of it, they didn't even care about me. And wow, they didn't even have the cojones to do this in person. What the heck? So now let's flip this around. How many of you have broken up with someone using a text? That's what I thought. The shoe's on the other foot. Why did you choose a text? Why didn't you call the person on the phone? I mean, why didn't you at least have the decency to do that or meet with them face to face? Because you didn't want to go through the drama. Are you kidding me? How much easier is it to do a text instead of doing it on the phone? And then you have to listen to them cry or try to talk you out of it. Or face to face, maybe they're going to make a scene. Or sometimes students have told me there's an element of danger in this. Like they're afraid the person's going to retaliate or come after them. And so that's what I'm telling you. Do it in a public space. I don't know. There's lots of crazy people out there. So, but seriously. So here's another example of the channel you use to send a message also sends a message. Just like if you're having a formal wedding, a very formal wedding, and it's going to be a very posh event, and maybe your family has a lot of money or whatever the heck, then typically you don't sit there and invite all your guests with a text message. You get the very fancy, formal, beautiful photograph. We're so in love. Picture there on the formal wedding invitation, and you send those out. So formality. So again, class, the channel you use to send a message also sends a message. There's actually a very old, I don't know if you're familiar with the old series Sex and the City. There's an episode from that old series where he breaks up with her on a post-it note. Okay, talk about the channel. What do we use post-it notes for? Reminders or oh yes, that's on my to-do. I need to break up with her today. Whoosh, we throw them away. So of course she's devastated in the episode, but there again, a post-it note. Oh my God, how harsh is that? So the channel you use to send a message also sends a message. And now I hope you can also talk about the relationship between code and channel. That the channel you pick impacts the codes because it either gives you access to all three, which can minimize the opportunity for miscommunication, or because you're omitting one or more of those codes, it can actually create more opportunity for miscommunication. So there you go. And like I said, for your entertainment, go to handouts and you can watch that Key and Peele. What else? So those are the codes, that's channel, but we're not done yet. Can you imagine? We're not done. If you go back to those diagrams, what else impacts the meaning of the message? What else has the potential to cause miscommunication? Noise. Who knew? Noise. So as you're sending that message over to the receiver, right? The source is sending the message to the receiver. Noise can come in and interfere. So, and there's two types of noise. There's external noise, and that's a no-brainer. You're trying to talk to someone, and maybe there's a lot of traffic noise in the background, or you're at a nightclub and the boom, boom, boom of the bass, and the band is too loud and you can't hear. So there's noise, or other people are talking and you can't hear. Right. So external noise is interfering, or there's a loud air conditioner or whatever it is. Or you're at home. Think of all of our Zoom calls and this and that where you're trying to talk and oh my Lord, the kid in the background is making a ton of noise, your poor kid or your pet, like me. My pet was causing me noise, my cat, in the opening video because he was making noise and he's walking around and I'm distracted. That's a form of noise. Now, internal noise is more fun. Internal noise is our thoughts, any thoughts, feelings, physiological states of being that are interfering with us sending or receiving the message. So what do I mean by that? So uh, here I am, and I have, like, I was sick. Like I told you, I was ill. So when you're ill or you're sick, whether you're the source or receiver, in this case, I would have been the source, you can't concentrate. You feel ill. You can't encode the message. You're not feeling well. You're not able to even receive the nonverbal feedback, right? Because you're ill. You don't feel good. So that could be one. Or you're the receiver of the message and you're just like, I can't breathe. I feel horrible. So that interferes. So it can be states of being, physiological. Your body doesn't feel good. It can be your own thoughts. Either you come into class and you just had the best weekend ever, right? And you're still thinking about that glorious weekend. So you're having a hard time listening to the professor. It's like, who cares about this? Ah, my weekend. And so your own thoughts are distracting you. You're daydreaming. Your own internal thoughts are interfering with the message. Or maybe you just had a fight with someone. And so you come into class and you're trying to listen and you're still arguing with the person. You're like, I should have said this. And when I get out of this class, I'm going to tell them this. So you're not receiving anything. So internal noise is physiological, psychological interference with communication. And by the way, it can also, speaking of physiological, and I also wanted to bring up sign language because some of you may be going into ASL, learning ASL. Some people are from the deaf community, and so that's what they use as ASL. Notice that's a whole nother language. And that language totally depends on the nonverbals, right? The nonverbal system of symbols. Actually, I love you. There you go. And so that's very fascinating. And my daughter is actually studying speech pathology at UT Austin. So she's learning ASL. And so there it is. It's a whole nother language. It's a system of symbols, another representative system of symbols that is a language that represents it. And it's all nonverbal to make up for, again, the loss of the vocal tone in the parrot language. Okay. And very, very beautiful. Another point that somebody who was actually in class and studying ASL. So she asked, she said, well, we were talking about intrapersonal communication. And I said, how you talk to yourself, those little voices inside your head, like I hear those voices with the language, right? The way we talk to ourselves. Well, in the deaf community, apparently, they see it. It's the sign language. They see the ASL. They see that's totally different. That's frame of reference, which we'll talk about in a minute. So noise can interfere, and you can kind of think about, so are you seeing how complex this is? We're encoding and decoding messages. We've got here's my kitty again, speaking of distractions. We've got the different codes, we've got the different channels, right? Isn't he cute? Say hi, Marlo. That's impacting the message. It's a whole symbolic system. It's all a symbolic representative system. So the fact that it's a code, here's all the potential then for miscommunication. And now we've got noise. So speaking of the Super Bowl, right? Think about, okay, let's do a football analogy. And if you hate football, sorry. So you got the quarterback, right, who's passing the ball. So you can think of him as the source of the message. The football is the message. And then you got the receiver back here who's trying to catch the ball and head for the touchdown, which would be shared meaning. And just go with me here. Anything, and then what happens? You've got all these plays, so guys that are running interference to try to prevent that message from getting to the receiver. So you can think of noise, the external, internal noise, the channel you're using that might omit one of the codes. All of that is coming into play to try to run interference so that to prevent the receiver from catching the ball. That's what happens sometimes. Okay, that's what happens. So you can think of it like that if it gives you a visual. What else? There's also another type of noise, and this is called semantic noise. And this is here on your second sheet of your study guide. So semantic noise, grammatical constructions or multiple word meanings that interfere with communication or shared meaning. So semantics actually has to do with the meanings of words and the fact that different words or one word can have different meanings, right? Okay. And so if you and I, and this has to do too with our frame of reference, with our own experiences, because we're going to get into this frame of reference idea. What are we really trying to communicate, class? Our own individual experiences of the world. What do we use to decode messages? Our own individual experiences of the world, of what it's like to be alive, right? So keep that in mind. So and this can be another form of noise. If you and I are having a conversation and we're talking about puppies or a puppy, okay? And I'm thinking of my cute little puppy who's so cute and he licks my face and he's all nice. And you're thinking about the puppy that bit you in the leg when you were 4 years old and it hurt and you had to get stitches. We are not having the same discussion about puppy. Do you see? Semantic noise. We are not assigning the same meaning to the word puppy, okay? Because we've had very different experiences of it. And here's another example, and I hate to admit this truly happened. So hang with me, we're almost done. We're almost done with part 2. They don't call me a speech teacher for nothing. I can talk. So here we go. So my husband now, right? We've been married 21 years. Like, seems like yesterday, class. I love him. No, we've been together a long time. He's fabulous. He teaches English for El Paso Community College. Some of you may know him, Lawrence Welsh. But anyway, this is back when we were first dating. And I know you all were born with email addresses. You were born into this social media age, right? This computer mediated age that we live in. Some of us did not. Okay. We had to actually acquire an email address. So we were going through the time back in the 90s where email was becoming commonplace, and it wasn't before. You have to understand there was no email. It was not commonplace. So it's starting to become commonplace, particularly in the workplace, and people are getting their email addresses, and it's all very exciting. So we're dating at the time. We're not married yet. And so I said, "Hey, I got my email at work. It's whatever it was at the time." And he said, "Oh yeah, I have mine now too. It's lawrencewelsh@hotmail.com." And I proceeded to get very upset. I was like, "What do you mean your email address is lawrencewelsh@hotmail.com?" And he's kind of looking at me funny. Because, class, I thought he meant hot mail, M-A-L-E, like a hot dude, man, hot mail. Fortunately, my husband is a great communicator, lots of emotional intelligence. So he caught on right away. He's like, no, not hot mail, hot mail, M-A-I-L. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and then everything was okay, and the rest was history, as they say. We got married. So, but seriously, that is a form of semantic noise. That is semantic noise. Because the two words, male and male, are what we call homophones. Same sound. Same sound like the same word, but they're not. So that's another form of semantics. plus another form of semantics is just the fact that that word can have different meanings for more than one meaning. And then there's constructions. So it can be that the grammatical construction is ambiguous. So let me give you this question. What has the cat in its paws? Speaking of cats. What has the cat in his paws? One more time. What has the cat in its paws? What does that question mean? There's at least two possibilities. What larger animal, like a dog, has the cat in its paws? So what has the cat in its paws? What larger animal has the cat in its paws? Or what smaller animal, like a little mouse, does the cat actually have in its paws? The cat's paws. What has the cat in its paws? So that's an ambiguous grammatical construction. And so that's semantic noise also. Okay. So are you seeing all this? We've got all kinds of potential here for miscommunication. And that's here on your sheet. Then we already went through feedback. But here is the kicker, class. Here is the kicker. A lot of times, I would argue the majority of the time, unless it's something simple like noise, external noise, etc., frame of reference is the primary reason, I should say, that so many miscommunications occur. A person's frame of reference or fields of experience. And this is not explained all that well in either textbook. So go with me here. What is a person's frame of reference and what are fields of experience? I define it as the sum total of an individual's or a communicator's experiences that influence the meaning of messages sent and received. The sum total of an individual's experiences. And like I just said, what are we really trying to communicate when we encode and decode messages? Again, I'm going to repeat it. What are we really trying to encode? Usually we are encoding some aspect of our frame of reference, some aspect of our field of experience, whatever that is. And that's what we're sending across. What does the receiver use to try to decode that message? The receiver uses his or her own frame of reference and field of experience to try to figure out what does person A mean. So you're like, okay, Ms. McNeil, who cares? We know this. It's everybody's has a different point of view. Yeah, it's complex. It's more complex than that. It plays out in more complex ways. Let's put it that way. So let's start naming some things that make up a person's individual field of experience or frame of reference. Start naming things, you'll be right. Where the person was born, okay? What neighborhood they were born in, what family they were born into, what language they speak, what country they were born in, what state, what type of family they were born into, their race, or their race ethnicity, their sex gender, right? That you're set from the moment you come out as a boy or a girl, you are, boom, assigned certain things. Certain things are imposed upon you right from the get-go, depending upon the culture you were born into and how gender and sex is constructed in your culture, okay? Your religion. Oh my God, your political affiliation. Are we totally seeing this play out right now? It is wild. So your religion, the language you speak. I mean, keep naming things, you'll be right. Your age impacts your frame of reference. Somebody in high school has a very different frame of reference than somebody who's in midlife, who's middle-aged. Our generational references change. I could start naming the popular musicians from my day, and you may not know who they are. And then you start naming the popular musicians from your day, and an older person might not even know who the heck you're talking about. Or I reference TV shows, and you're like, what? So unless they're, it's happening now. This is how you know you're getting old, class. All your old TV shows that you used to watch back in the day are getting rebooted. Oh my Lord. Hawaii Five-O, Magnum PI, Charmed even. I'm like, how is this happening to me? This is not supposed to happen to me. This is supposed to happen to everybody else. But in any way, class, so your age, your socioeconomic state, are you from a family that is rich, that has a high income level, a lot of social capital, a lot of money? Are you from a family that's middle income? Are you from a family that's lower income? Huge differences in huge impact on your value system and the way you look at the world. So, like I said, you can just keep naming things. And you're like, okay, Ms. McNeil, who cares again? If we use our own frame of reference, if that is what we're trying to encode, and if we use our own frame of reference and experiences to decode messages, to assign meanings to the message, do any two people share the exact same frame of reference or fields of experience? No. Not even identical twins. And I've had identical twins and talked to them. At some point, that identical twin has a different teacher from the other one. This identical twin goes to Europe, this one doesn't. Already, the identical twins are getting different experiences in life that alter their frame of reference. Your education level, the education you have, alters your frame of reference, alters your way of seeing and understanding the world. So, boom. Okay. So if that is in fact what we are trying to communicate with other people, and if other people are using their own frame of reference to figure out what you meant, and no two people have identical frames of reference, can communication ever be 100%? No. But we can come close. We can come close, class. But this is the source of what's called existential angst, or the anxiety of existence. Can anyone ever really understand me? No, but they can come close. On the depressing side of this, Joseph Conrad said, older famous writer, 1800s, wrote A Heart of Darkness. He said, we are as we dream, alone. We are as we dream, alone. Kind of depressing, isn't it? But I have an answer for that. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I have something that can mitigate that. Because just like maybe communication can never be 100%, we can also, that in itself, right? Just go with me here, class. We can still comfort each other. We can still come close. Who has the answer to Conrad, or has at least, kind of an answer to Conrad? The police! And I don't mean the cops. Speaking of generational references, the Police from the 80s, the new wave band, The Police, with Sting from the 1980s. If you don't know who it is, look it up. In fact, I'm going to probably upload the song for you under handouts. So Sting, The Police, they have a song called the SOS song. I'm going to torture you just for a minute. It goes like this. sending out an SOS, sending out an SOS. I hope that someone gets I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. Yeah. Okay. It's a great, this song pretty much sums up the whole transactional model of communication, if you ask me. Here's the premise. He's a castaway. He's on an island. No one here but me. So much more loneliness than any man can bear. I've been cast into despair. So what he does is then he's so lonely, he puts a message in a bottle and he throws it out to sea. Okay. He wakes up the next day and 100 million bottles with messages from other castaways have washed upon the shore. And the key line of the song is, seems I'm not alone in being alone. It seems I'm not alone in being alone. So class, even if it's true, because we have different frames of reference, because no two people can have the same experiences of the world, that in itself creates a common frame of reference, right? Seems I'm not alone in being alone. So there you go. So that's kind of the kicker. And that's what impacts communication the most, and that's why we have lots of misunderstandings. We tend to get trapped in our own frame of reference, our own way of seeing the world, and anything that's outside of that we're a little afraid of. We tend to think it's inferior. We judge it very harshly through our own lens, even though we may not understand it. And one of the most powerful things you can do is get someone who really is kind of locked into the way they're seeing things to see something different, to see something from your point of view, particularly when we're talking about racial prejudice and gender prejudice and other forms of prejudice. And if you look right now, what's happening in our political situation, it is very analogous to both sides really being trapped in their own ways of seeing things. And there's just we apparently can't find a way to get to compromise, to cross that bridge, so to speak. Hopefully we will. And it's interesting because I'm going to take math. Haven't you ever had and you could, maybe it's something in English, whatever it is, and you don't understand how to do this damn math problem, and you've had the teacher explain it to you, you've had your best friend explain it to you, you've had the smartest person in the class try to explain it to you, and it's like whoosh, somebody comes along and they explain that problem to you or that concept to you in different words, or they use an example that you can relate to, that's relatable in your own frame of reference, and you look at that damn math problem and you go, oh, I get it now. What just happened? You've had 3-4 people explain it to you and you didn't get it. Another person comes along and they use slightly different words or slightly different examples, and the light bulb goes on. That is a very powerful thing. Very powerful thing. In your handout section under Blackboard, I uploaded for you an optical illusion. You look at the picture, and some people see the old woman immediately, and some people see the young woman immediately. And some people are able to see both. And if we were in a live situation, I typically ask you that, and you'll hear, oh, I see. How many of you see the old woman? How many of you see the young woman? How many of you see both? Fewer hands. Then I try to get each group to see, because the old woman is a profile. You see her big nose. The the little line here is actually her mouth. She has a stole on. The young woman is 3/4. You actually just see her little tiny nose, her eyelid. This becomes her jawline, and that line here is actually her choker or her necklace. You'll have to go in and study the picture. And invariably, after I pointed this out, what you'll hear, oh, I see it now. That is exactly what frame of reference is. That's exactly how it plays out in complex ways. We don't have systemic racism in our nation. What are they talking about? There's black people in all these leadership positions. What's systemic racism? Until someone is able to explain it, give you examples, whatever, and you're going, oh. Or someone else comes along and says, yeah, but white privilege, I don't feel like I have white privilege. We're barely putting food on the table. Da 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 da. And someone's going, wait, you need to look at it like this. Oh, these are very difficult things. And right now, Republicans and Democrats are having a really difficult time. We saw with the storming of our Capitol. Some of us are outside that looking at it, and I think, looking at that situation and going, these people are traitors. What were they doing? They killed police. All these police were injured. They were trying to disrupt a legitimate election. What the heck? From inside their frame of reference, they are the patriots. We're the ones that are the treasonous ones. And where are the facts and all that? Where are the facts and all that? I'm going to leave that for ethics. But whatever it is, even if you're not real political and this and that, just think of two people trying to understand each other. And one only sees the old woman, and the other one only sees the young woman. And trying to use examples, trying to understand where the other person is coming from so you can get them to go, oh, okay. And we'll talk about some of the ways I think you can do that, but this is going to require lots of study. And this is really the study of rhetoric. How do you construct those messages to achieve a particular purpose? But this is frame of reference. Frame of reference is what interferes a lot with shared meaning. Okay, that's why communication is never 100%. Okay, so and the other thing I'll give you one more thing. I know we're at an hour. I hope you're still awake. You can always pause this, get something to eat, come back. Okay, McNeil, finish it up. So, we did all that. No two people share the exact same meaning. And the other thing I want you to realize, where does the meaning of the message actually lie? Is it in the words we use? Maybe. Partially. Okay. Let's go back to our semantics a bit. Let's take the word dog. Dog. What popped into your mind? What popped into your mind? And I'll typically go around the classroom if we're live and people say things like, oh, well, a beagle. Why? Because my dog's a beagle. German Shepherd. Why? Because I have a German Shepherd. That's my dog. Loud, noisy, slobbery. Why? Because my neighbor's dog always comes up to me and does that. They're loud and I can't sleep and it slobbers all over me. Oh, okay. Dog. My friend. What's up, dog? Dog. My ex. Okay, do you see, right? Dog. Snoop Dogg. Dog. Snoopy from the Peanuts comic strip. Dog. Beethoven from the old Disney movies with Beethoven, the St. Bernard dog. Dog. Clifford. Anyway, you get my point. We get like 22 dogs in class. Because where do people go to assign meaning to the word symbol dog? Their own experience of dog, their own field of, their own frame of reference, their own experience of dog. And notice some of those dogs are pop culture dogs. Clifford, Snoopy, Snoop Dogg. I mean, that's a whole nother frame of reference. Our culture creates a whole nother, our pop culture creates a whole nother frame of reference in and of itself. So the communication theory behind this, the concept behind this is words don't mean, people mean. Words don't mean, people mean. We are the ones that assign meaning to messages. We go into our own experience, and that's how we assign meaning to messages. So there's your key concepts. Think about that. And la 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 la. I think I've hit almost everything right at an hour. Who knew? So we need to kind of think about all this, class, whether we're in a business communication context, an interpersonal context, or particularly a public speaking context. And we're gonna we're gonna talk more about this too when we get into the ethical public speaking material. So I hope this has entertained you. I will try to upload the SOS song. And it seems like there was one other thing I was going to tell you, and now it's whoosh left. But frame of reference, and this can really play out in complex ways. And I think really is the cause of a lot of prejudice and things that we're talking about, or that are issues that we're experiencing in our own society. So, on that note, I will leave you. Have a fabulous weekend. I will try to send the questions for this material soon, but I won't do that till the weekend, and it won't be due, for a while. So have a fabulous time. Have a great weekend. And remember, seems I'm not alone in being alone. Take it easy, class. Words to think about, especially during COVID.